The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting a delicate pattern on the wooden floor. It was a perfect Saturday, the kind that whispered promises of tranquility and leisure, a day meant for coffee on the porch, and perhaps a stroll around the neighborhood. But peace, I had learned, is a precarious thing when Karen is your neighbor. The neighborhood, a picturesque slice of suburban life with its manicured lawns and picket fences, was generally a sanctuary. But Karen, the self-appointed arbiter of all things HOA, seemed to perceive it as her personal fiefdom. Her presence was as constant as the ticking of a clock. Her opinions as sharp as the edge of the picket fences she patrolled. I remember the first time she approached me, her footsteps echoing on the pavement like the approach of a storm. Her request was simple but unreasonable: muzzle my dog Max, because his joyous barks were to her ears an affront to the sanctity of silence. Max, with his tail-wagging exuberance and soulful eyes, a creature of pure innocence, was now the subject of her latest campaign. I listened to Karen's grievances with the patience of a saint, nodding at intervals, allowing her words to wash over me like an incoming tide. Internally, I was a sea of calm, the eye of a hurricane. In the grand scheme of things, this was a mere raindrop in the ocean of life. I smiled politely, a practiced gesture that masked my true thoughts, and assured her I would consider her request. Karen's eyes were flinty, her gaze unyielding, yet I remained unmoved. She departed with a flourish, her indignation trailing behind her like the train of an ornate gown. In her wake, the neighborhood seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Over the next few days, life resumed its familiar cadence. I took Max for his usual walks, his muzzle conspicuously absent, much to Karen's chagrin. Her discontent was palpable, a storm cloud on the horizon, but I carried on unfazed. My resolve was quiet, yet firm, a fortress of tranquility against her tempestuous demands. Then, one afternoon, as I sat under the shade of an oak tree savoring the melody of birdsong, I witnessed a transformation. Karen, seemingly unaware of my presence, unleashed her fury upon a group of playing children. Her voice, usually so measured and composed, now raged like a wildfire, consuming everything in its path. The children stood frozen. Their laughter silenced their eyes wide with confusion and fear. I watched unseen, my phone in hand, capturing the scene as it unfolded. There was an irony in the air, a sweet symmetry to the situation. Karen, so intent on policing the neighborhood, had become the very disruption she sought to eliminate. The footage was damning, a testament to the hypocrisy simmering beneath her polished exterior. As I reviewed the video later, I felt a curious mix of vindication and sadness. It was a reminder that beneath the veneer of control often lay chaos, but it was also a quiet promise to myself to remain steadfast, to let Karen's tempest pass over me like a summer storm, leaving nothing in its wake but the scent of rain on earth. The afternoon sun hung low, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns of our neighborhood. Each house stood like a soldier in a row, conforming to the strict standards set by the infamous HOA standards that were lately increasingly dictated by Karen. Karen. Her name was a whisper that rustled through hedges and slipped beneath doors. She carried the authority of the HOA with the fervor of a zealot on a crusade. Her latest crusade, of course, was my dog, Max, his crime, barking joyfully at the world. After the incident with the muzzle request, things had taken a turn. Karen's eyes, sharp and cold, now followed me with the intensity of a hawk. An official letter appeared tucked ominously in my mailbox. A first warning. My crime. An unfit garden gnome. apparently not in compliance with neighborhood aesthetics. I stared at the innocuous gnome, its cheerful face a silent protest against the absurdity. It seemed Karen had declared war armed with the HOA rulebook, wielding it like a sledgehammer to crush any perceived insubordination. The citations came swiftly and with precision, each more ludicrous than the last. A hedge trimmed at the wrong angle. A porch light, too bright. It was as if Karen was determined to drown me in paperwork, a deluge of bureaucracy intended to smother. Meanwhile, whispers grew a low hum of gossip fueled by her tales. Rumors spun a web of half-truths, sticky and persistent. I was the negligent neighbor, the one defying community harmony with my barking dog and my rebellious garden gnome. I became a focal point for her theatrics. At community gatherings, she performed for her audience, weaving narratives that painted me as the neighborhood's unwelcome anomaly. Her stories were rich in detail, her voice a symphony of disapproval, each word polished and rehearsed. In the quiet moments, I could almost admire her dedication. Almost. But the irony was not lost on me. Her crusade for silence, her demand for order stood stark against her own lack of self-restraint. Her voice, a constant reprimand, was far more intrusive than Max's joyful barks. And then there was the video, a glimpse of the truth raw and unvarnished. Karen, the guardian of civility, reduced to a furious tempest, her voice lashing out at children like a storm unleashed. It was a moment of weakness forever captured and unrestrained by the walls of her own home. I weighed my options. The memory of the video, a tempting weapon. To wield it meant stepping into Karen's world, playing her game of exposure and shame. For now, I held it close, a silent testament to hypocrisy. Time would reveal its necessity. Or perhaps Karen would push too far, and then it would be her own echo she would fear. The rustling of autumn leaves whispered secrets as I walked along the sidewalk, a discreet observer in a neighborhood unraveling beneath the surface. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, its contents a blend of liberation and trepidation. The recording, Karen's shrill voice tearing through the tranquility of a Saturday morning. Her harsh reprimands echoing in the faces of neighborhood children. Was my ace a silent witness to her tyranny? I had watched her for weeks, her eyes sharp and accusatory, like a hawk perched high on its judgmental roost. She was relentless, circling with her demands, her latest being the muzzling of Max, my gentle German shepherd. Max, whose bark was an exuberant greeting, a conversation with the world, a far cry from the menace Karen painted. But this charade was about control, not noise. My resolve simmered beneath the surface, a quiet storm. Gathering strength, I spent evenings drafting letters to the HOA, carefully constructed narratives that merged factual precision with the irrefutable weight of evidence. The video, a weapon in a velvet sheath. Every encounter with her now felt like a game of chess where each move was measured, deliberate. I nodded and smiled all the while, reinforcing the fortress of my own strategy. I was the observer, the one who listened and documented, turning her words into exhibits within my growing dossier. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the lawn, I stood by my window watching. A group of children cycled past, their laughter punctuating the crisp air. Then she appeared, her presence like a storm cloud descending. Her arms flailed, her voice rising above the innocent cacophony. I watched my phone recording her descent into fury. Her words were a tapestry of irony, lamenting the disruption of peace while igniting discord with her own tongue. It was a performance both tragic and absurd, a theater of the absurd unfolding under the indifferent gaze of the evening sky. In those moments, clarity unveiled itself. Karen's demands, her insistence on conformity, were masks for something deeper, a need for control in a world slipping beyond her grasp. Her outbursts were not just against noise or dogs, they were against change, against a community evolving around her while she remained stagnantly rooted in her own narrative. Finally, the day arrived. The HOA meeting loomed, a gathering where facades would crumble. The hall was filled with a quiet tension, neighbors exchanging glances, whispers like wind through leaves. I sat calmly, the video cued, ready to let truth spill forth from the confines of my phone. As discussions meandered through the mundane, I waited for the opportune moment. When Karen's voice pierced the air, her complaints sharp and unyielding, I made my move. Standing, I let her words hang in the air before playing the recording. Silence fell thick and palpable. Her own voice, weaponized against her, echoed through the room. The children's startled cries, her relentless scolding, it was all there, undeniable. Her face flushed her mouth, a thin, bloodless line. In those moments, I felt no triumph, only a quiet release. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about balance, restoring a sense of harmony in a place she sought to dominate. As the meeting concluded, I slipped out into the night. The air was crisp, fragrant with the promise of a new beginning. Max, waiting at home, greeted me with a bark, a sound as natural and unburdened as the wind itself. Together we walked beneath the stars, leaving behind the echoes of a story finally brought to light. As the sun began to cast long-reaching shadows across our neighborhood, the air felt thick and electric, with the unspoken truths that lay between us. Karen's demands had always been a fuse, sparking a quiet defiance in me, yet now her own fire threatened to consume her. The video of her shrieking at children, a symphony of outrage and venom, had begun its silent circulation, a private viewing party among neighbors. Few words were spoken, but glances were exchanged like covert messages, old alliances considered and reconsidered in the wake of revelation. I walked down the street, the leash in my hand, a reassuring weight. My dog trotted beside me, blissfully unaware of the human dramas unfolding above his head. His ears twitched as we passed the park. The children were playing, their laughter, an innocent counterpoint to the tension seeping through our cul-de-sac. Parents on benches whispered, with the hush of a gathering storm, eyes darting toward Karen's house like they expected it to suddenly combust. Karen kept her blinds drawn for days, windows that had once been portals. For her watchful eyes were now barriers deflecting the scrutiny she had so eagerly directed at others. The irony was not lost on anyone. Her fortress of judgment had become a prison, and she, a captive within her own rules, her own demands. She had woven her own cocoon, but whether she would transform or merely stew in her self-imposed isolation remained to be seen. I felt the shift beneath my feet. A community stitched together by proximity, now unraveled by exposure. Each step was a step away from the past, towards something uncertain. The neighborhood had grown uneasy with the unmasking of one of its own. We were no longer an anonymous collection of homes, but a woven tapestry of lives intersecting with new intensity. In the days that followed, a peculiar harmony settled over us, the kind that comes after a storm when everything glistens with the residue of rain. Conversations became quieter, more focused. People greeted each other with the softness of shared secrets. There was a sense of unity, the unspoken acknowledgement that we all wore masks, some more convincing than others. Karen, however, remained a specter. Her presence lingered like a ghostly reminder of power, unchecked of the danger in unchecked authority. She was a cautionary tale told in glances and hushed tones. Yet as much as she had retreated, her absence was a tangible presence. The silence from her house spoke louder than any tirade. I found myself reflecting on the nature of power, how it was wielded, how it could shift with the simplest of revelations. For so long, Karen had thrived on control, on the power of her voice, her gaze, her relentless pursuit of perfection, according to her own rigid standard. But power, I realized, is a precarious thing. It slips through fingers like water, elusive and ever-changing. In the quiet corners of my mind, I wondered what Karen thought in her solitude. Did she see the irony? Did she recognize herself in the jagged edges of that video? Or was she lost in the same maze of justification that had led her to this point? Whatever the case, the neighborhood watched and waited, like the ocean before a tsunami. The calm was deceptive, laden with potential energy. We were bound together by the knowledge of her unraveling, the shared experience of witnessing a queen dethroned. And so we moved forward, step by cautious step, into the uncertain landscape of what came next. The air felt different that morning, as if the world held its breath, waiting for the inevitable resolution of a long brewing storm. The sun cast its golden fingers through the leaves, dancing playfully on the sidewalk, a stark contrast to the underlying tension that simmered just beneath the surface. I glanced at my dog Max, whose tail wagged in blissful ignorance of the chaos that had embroiled his innocent existence. He bounded ahead, every step a testament to his unyielding joy despite the contention his presence had sparked. Karen's demand that Max be muzzled had been the spark, her insistence a relentless drumbeat echoing through the corridors of neighborhood gossip. Yet her own actions, captured inadvertently through my lens, revealed a different cadence. Her shrill voice, the pointed finger, and the wide-eyed terror of the children she confronted painted a different picture. It was a symphony of irony, a dance of hypocrisy performed under the glaring light of her own hubris. The video. A silent sentinel on my phone awaited its moment of reckoning. I had pondered my options, weighed them like a judicious scale, tipping ever so slightly towards justice. The HOA meetings, a theater of false smiles and unsubtle jabs, offered an ideal stage for such a revelation. But I chose a different path, one not lined with public confrontation, but with the quiet, inexorable march of legality. I had slipped into the role of investigator, quietly gathering evidence, stacking it like bricks to construct an unassailable case. Old emails from neighbors, tales of Karen's past indiscretions whispered in confidence, and the video itself formed an ironclad foundation. I contacted a lawyer, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, skilled in navigating the murky waters of homeowner disputes. She saw the video, nodded, her lips curling into a smile that promised resolution. The letter she drafted was a masterpiece of legal finesse, a tapestry woven with threads of logic and consequence. It spoke of defamation, of harassment, and the violation of HOA bylaws. It hinted at repercussions far beyond the petty confines of neighborhood squabbles. Karen, in her quest to control and dominate, had overstepped, and now she stood on the precipice of her own making. We sent the letter with measured restraint, a whisper of thunder preceding the coming storm. Days passed, each one a testament to patience. Then the response arrived. A terse missive from Karen's lawyer, the bravado now tempered by the stark reality of law. A promise to cease her harassment, a retreat from the battlefield she had once claimed with ferocity. The neighborhood buzzed with the news, an undercurrent of relief mingling with the thrill of vindication. Karen's voice, once so strident, now softened her presence, diminished. I watched from my porch, Max at my feet as she passed by, her gaze averted her steps. Hurried. The empire she had built on intimidation and bluster had crumbled, not with a bang, but with the gentle whisper of truth. I felt no need for celebration, no desire for further conflict. There was satisfaction in the quiet victory and the knowledge that justice had been served with dignity intact. Peace returned to our corner of the world. The air lighter, the sun brighter, and through it all Max remained the constant, unburdened, unmuzzled, and blissfully unaware of the upheaval he had inadvertently navigated with a wag of his tail. The evening air carried a cool whisper, the kind that promised change in the rustling of leaves. Our little community, once tense and taut under the rule of Karen's iron-fisted demands, now hung in a delicate balance. Her rein, once unyielding, was teetering precariously, and all it needed was a gentle nudge. I lingered on my porch, watching the streetlights blink to life one by one, their glow casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and yawn, eager to shake off the shackles of daylight's demands. It was the kind of night where secrets could slip out unnoticed, where truths could finally find their voice. Karen. She was a storm that had brewed for too long. Her thunderous voice, once a constant backdrop to our lives, now silent under the weight of exposure. The video had done its work unraveling her fabricated tales of civility and order. Her screams at the neighborhood, children captured raw and unfiltered, toppled the tower of her authority like a house of cards. The HOA meeting loomed like a specter, the turnout larger than usual. People who had once sat muted in the shadows found themselves emboldened. Whispers of change fluttered through the assembly, hope weaving through despair like threads of gold in a tattered cloth. In the center of it all, Karen sat, her presence diminished, the queen of the cul-de-sac dethroned. Her eyes darted, searching for allies among the faces that once turned to her for guidance. But loyalty built on fear is as fragile as spun glass. One crack, and it shatters. The room buzzed with a nervous energy, a hive alive with the potential for transformation. I watched as neighbors shifted uneasily at first, then with growing confidence aligning themselves with the tide that carried them away from Karen's grasp. The air felt electric, charged with possibility. In the midst of it all, she finally spoke. Her voice, usually sharp and cutting, now held a tremor of desperation, a concession laced with a plea. But it fell flat, swallowed by the collective resolve that had grown too strong to be swayed. There was no room for tyrants in this new vision for our community. I found myself filled with a quiet satisfaction, not from her downfall, but from the promise of what lay ahead. The neighborhood, once a battleground of her making, could finally breathe. We could all breathe. It was over. Not with a bang, but with a soft exhalation of relief. The meeting ended, chairs scraping against the floor as people rose renewed. Outside, the night was still young, and the world felt ripe with potential. I walked home under the stars, the path lit with a silvery light that seemed to twinkle with approval. Behind me, the echoes of change lingered in the night air, trailing like the tail of a comet. The winds had shifted, carrying with them the promise of new beginnings. Karen had not been vanquished, not entirely, but her power had been diffused, scattered like dandelion seeds caught in a summer breeze. The community had spoken not with words, but with a unified silence that held more weight than any decree she could mandate. And as I crossed the threshold of my home, the loyal wag of my dog's tail greeting me, I realized the true victory was not in exposing her, but in reclaiming our lives from the shadows, in turning the page to a new chapter, one penned by our own hands where everyone had a voice and no one had to live muzzled